Check. Nope. Level.
That's all right. Baby, that's all. All that I wanna do. Hey. Well, that's all right. It's all right. Baby, that's all. Oh, that's all. That's all right. Oh, that's all right. Baby, that's all.
A good Monday morning to you on this July 5th. You're tuned into Real Talk. Thanks for downloading us. Thanks for subscribing to us. Thanks for showing up here live Monday morning, if that's what you're doing. This episode is presented by our friends at Bitcoin Well. You know, right now, when people are talking about crypto, they're going, well, which way is this going? Which direction is this going? Up or down? What's up? What does this all mean? Is this even real? Don't blame me for having those conversations. Don't blame me for wondering about that. One of your friends probably thinks this is malarkey. One of your other friends probably is telling you this is the future of commerce and security and saving and sovereign wealth. If you have questions, you feel like they're dumb ones, you know they're not, but you want to go to somebody that knows what they're talking about, we recommend Bitcoin Well. You'll find them under the sponsors tab on our website, ryanjesperson.com.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Well, it's been a few days away from the studio. It's great to be back with you today. The team took a couple of days, Thursday and Friday of last week, July 1st, obviously here in Canada. A lot of people observing Canada Day, others not observing Canada Day or observing it in a different way. This year in the context of what our nation has been grappling with and the conversations that we've been having. Coming up in about an hour from now, we're going to talk to a member of the Enoch Cree Nation in the province of Alberta, Lorelei Mullings. We mentioned what she's been up to mid last week on the show. She's been demonstrating. She's been setting up and demonstrating and been joined by others, including on July 1st, outside what was formerly known as the Charles Camsell Indian Hospital in North Edmonton. For many, many years, this was a hospital where Indigenous people, in particular, those from northern communities, were flown in particular those with tuberculosis. And this was post-World War II, by the way, and the hospital has long been, or let me say the property has long been rumored depending on, it feels disrespectful, Sarah Hoyles, it feels disrespectful to use the word haunted because in the city of Edmonton, anybody that's familiar with that area, anybody who's familiar with the Camsell Hospital will know that people weren't talking about things like residential schools and unmarked graves, and that wasn't necessarily where the bigger picture conversation was. People more would just talk about, that property, that place is haunted. And now I think in the context of some of the discoveries that are being made, some of the results of these ground radar investigations into these former residential school sites, the context I think is being more specifically discussed with people, and that's what's prompted Lorelei to set up this demonstration.
Absolutely. I mean, when we spoke with a variety of different guests over the last several weeks, there was mention that no, we're not just talking about residential schools. We're talking about hospitals as well, and this is one of those hospitals. I have been aware, maybe haunted was a way of pointing to something.
I think it was. I think haunted is the word that people would just use when they would say we recognize that there's something about this. We've heard that there's something about this place. We've heard that there's some reason that this property that sat dormant, that sat unused since the early 1990s.
Yeah.
Kind of the same as residential schools, if you look at the timing. But people would always reference that in that part of town. Like, the Camsell Hospital. Kids are out there, people are throwing beer bottles against the wall, or that's where people are, I wouldn't go in there. That's that kind of a property. Well, now, as it's under development for residences, like apartments, they're going to do a townhouse or some sort of a condominium build up there. more and more people like Lorelei have been talking. So Chief Billy Morin was there from Enoch Cree Nation. Our very own Sam Brooks was down there shooting photos over the weekend. We're going to get to that conversation in about an hour from now. In 5 or 6 minutes from now, we're also going to talk about taxing the church. Should churches be taxed in Canada? And so I wanted to point this out just under 20 minutes ago. If you're watching this live, if you're checking out the podcast later Monday or even into early Tuesday morning, I encourage you to swing by my Twitter profile. You'll note that I've just put out an unscientific, unofficial Twitter poll. It's been up for about 20 minutes. We have 525 votes already, so I think this will be a good one. Should churches pay taxes in Canada? So far, a whopping 89.7%. Let's call it 90%. Let's say 9 of 10 early respondents, 20 minutes in, say, yup, tax them. About 5%, 4.8% say no way, and about 5%, 5.6%, let's call it 6%, say, well, it depends. And then they start to get into it. We say if you're going to vote for the "it depends" option, you should explain it. We should provide
Unpack it for us.
Provide some insights
Yeah.
so we understand. And so, for example, Krista on Twitter says the divide between tiny rural churches and urban mega churches is very different. Great point. Says plus there are denominational head offices and all that money. Krista says I'm not sure what the best course is, but something needs to be done. Thor says, out of curiosity, what's the reason they don't? And we're going to get into this with our guests, Brian Dijkema from Cardus and Leslie Rosenblood from the Center for Inquiry Canada in just a little bit. The short answer is churches, religious groups, nonprofits can, if they can demonstrate they provide a public good, they can be exempt from things like federal income taxes.
Right. They're considered a charity. And so charities falling under that umbrella as a qualification as a charity, they don't pay taxes. So it's like many other charities.
Traxy says, I answered depends. They should be taxed on every dime they make that is not put back into the community. Interesting. Lee, meantime, says tax them right out of business. And then I've had some others that are we've had some responses from people that are, I guess the word you would use would be triggered. Some people that are unhappy that we're even asking the question. So that's an interesting one there. We'll get into that. Should we tax the church? We're going to talk about this protest. And then there's so many other things going on. We take off on a Wednesday. We do the show Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We're out of here Saturday, Sunday. It feels like an eternity. And in the meantime, we went from talking about Lytton, BC, setting 3 straight days of national temperature records to the entire community burning to the ground in about 15 minutes late Wednesday evening.
That was what was wild about it, is that I was like, we actually talked about Lytton. Like, we talked about it being that it was the record-setting location.
We talked about it like, can you believe 49 degrees Celsius? Can you believe it? We took a look at the map that showed that in all the United States in recorded history, there were only 4 states, I think it was, that had
there
seen.
was Arizona was in one of those.
Southern California, New Mexico, I think it was, and maybe Nevada, if I remember correctly. But like the desert, the arid regions, right? And then the next thing you know, there it is. Sam Brooks putting it up on the screen for those of you that are watching on YouTube. That gives you a real clear context in the recorded history of the United States. Look at all the places that had not seen temperatures as hot as Lytton, BC. Well, obviously the conversation has changed now as the province of British Columbia is battling wildfires. It's wildfire season, as they say. I always think about the people that are there on the ground, like literally the boots on the ground that are in there. Covered a wildfire once back in the TV reporter days, and it was just a phenomenal experience. Working with sustainable resource development, so working with supervisors and crews, they were able to send media in. They wanted to give people a sense of what we were dealing with, right? And so you can talk about hectares and things like that, but you want to give people a sense of what it looks like, so people sort of gauge wildfires by how many football fields they are, right? Or how many city blocks or square blocks they are. We had 2 perspectives. One of them I got to shoot the pool feed. So back when I was a videographer running a camera, they sent me up into this was very stressful, by the way. I was like a young pup. I was pretty new on the job. And they send one videographer up there to shoot, and then everybody shares the video.
Oh my goodness, that's
right?
a lot of
So
pressure.
it's like I was there for City TV, CTV, Global, CBC. Everybody's getting the same feed.
Don't mess it up.
Don't
Desmo.
mess it up. Although I'm also kind of like, you know what I could do is like just make it lousy for everybody and maybe bump our show up in the rate. No. But anyway, the grand being out of there, like out of a chopper, you've got like this sort of harness on the shoulder harness with this big 40-pound news camera, and you're just trying, and it's like you're behind the lens, but you're like, what is, like, wow, when you see it from the air. Right. And then you go down into the ground, and they took us in, got all like suited up and everything. And you're actually in there with the people that this has got to be some of the hardest work that you can imagine. I mean, wildland firefighting. Whew. And they're in there literally with like shovels and axes and things like this. Water bombers are going ahead, and trees are literally like every once in a while you just hear pop, and these tree trunks just explode from the heat. I mean, it's wild. It's amazing. Just think of the crews that are working there. Oh, and by the way, Bill Cosby's released from prison too.
Don't even...
You know I was going to bring it up. You know I was going to bring it up. So there's a lot that's happened in the last 4 days. Oh, and Les Habitants also. I don't mean to show up on a Monday, Sam, and just wreck everybody's day.
My day's fine on that front.
Wildfires, yeah, you don't care one bit. Wildfires. We could talk Bucks and Suns, NBA final. Then you care.
Yeah.
Then you care. But yeah, so Bill
Go Bucks.
Cosby's out, and the Habs. I mean, do or die tonight. You think that they're going to be able to win at least one?
I like this seems to be the playoff of sweeps. You know what I mean?
It
Like
does
it's
in a way.
happening over and
Totally.
over and over again. And
Oilers, Jets.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I hope they can get at least one, but I'm
don't
trying
know.
to keep the faith, man. I'm
Yeah.
trying to keep the faith.
Tampa is just rolling right now, so I don't know. I mean, Carey Price, I know, says he's got to be better. What does that even mean? It means like infallible. Would it go like?
If you weren't going to be better by now.
Well, but he has been amazing. Carey Price is like just been he has been the Montreal Canadiens through the playoffs, and so there you have. So that goes tonight. I don't know. I've got a buddy convinced that Tampa's going to throw it in Game 4 so they can win it on home ice in Game 5. They want to win it down in Tampa. It's not. If you talk to any athlete, that's just not how they work. If you have your heel on the neck of your opponent and you're choking them out, and you see, I don't know why I have to be so vivid on this, but you see the life leaving their eyes and they're starting to flicker, you don't say, well, maybe we should let them live for another day, right? Because then you breathe a little oxygen into the beast, and then all of a sudden it's 3-1, and then what if it's 3 games to 2,
Momentum
and then they
shifts.
just need to win 2. So I think Tampa closes it out tonight in Montreal 4 straight, but I hope I'm wrong. Not because I love the Habs. It'd be great to see a cup in Canada, but forget about that. That ain't happening. They're not winning 4 against Tampa. But I just like to watch more hockey. I'm just selfish. Once the Stanley Cup Finals are done, then what?
Then what?
We have to like go outside. You have to go outside. Is that what's going on?
WNBA.
We're gonna check in. Yeah, WNBA. Does their schedule follow the NBA schedule?
It basically goes opposite.
So you can always watch basketball.
You betcha.
It's almost like they know what they're doing. Right?
Almost.
So 714 votes on our poll. We'll get to that in just a second. Right now, I wanted to remind you, it's obviously no secret that running a small business isn't easy. Life as a business owner is hectic, to say the least. You should let Alberta Blue Cross help you. Find a little peace of mind with a group benefit plan. They offer flexible health, dental, life, and disability coverage for your employees. Even better, let your employees enroll and manage their coverage at any time on any device. Makes life easier for them. Makes life easier for you. Alberta Blue Cross. Explore your options at ab.bluecross.ca. Also wanted to let you know that our friends at McBain Camera right now are rolling out their trade-in event. It's just kicked off. This is a great opportunity to update your gear, to freshen up your camera bag, turn your old photography equipment into new possibilities with McBain. Get a 25% bonus in trade-in value for your secondhand gear through the month of July. They'll happily take in everything from vintage gear to the latest full-frame mirrorless cameras. You can bring your used cameras and lenses down to any McBain location to have it appraised. You got to allow them a few days so they can test it and assess it. The offer ends July 31st. All right, so you've got 26 days left. It ends July 31st. Visit McBainCamera.com to find the store nearest you. It's the McBain Camera Trade-In event through the month of July. All right, so on my Twitter profile, we've asked you, it's an unscientific, unofficial Twitter poll. We have 750 votes on the no's, about a half an hour in. Should churches pay taxes in Canada? Of the 750 votes, 89% are saying yep, 4.5% are saying no way, 6% are saying it depends. Brian Dijkema is the VP of External Affairs at the think tank Cardus. Cardus is a nonpartisan, faith-based think tank based out of Hamilton, Ontario. Leslie Rosenblood is the treasurer and secular chair of the Centre for Inquiry Canada, a national educational charity promoting reason, science, and secular values. I'm grateful that both Brian and Leslie have agreed to join us this morning. Good morning to both of you. Brian, why don't we begin with you? I mean, the assumption is that you would side on the no way angle here. No way churches should pay taxes in Canada. I don't want to make assumptions, though. What would the argument be?
The argument in favor of, well, I mean, it's interesting that this is coming up in the sort of the face of the horrors that we're witnessing, or at least the sort of unveiling of them. And I think that's in some sense, it's a natural reaction to people to say, look, this has been a terrible thing. And you focus on one of the parties that's been involved in it. And so on the one hand, I actually can understand where it's coming from. I think, though, if you look a little bit deeper at what churches do, and I don't mean just churches, I mean churches, mosques, gurdwara, synagogues, religious communities of all sorts. If you look at them and you look at the contribution that they make to public society, you look at the way that they form people, and you look at the way that they actually provide a means for people to move beyond those horrors, to find peace, to find reconciliation, to find new ways of doing that, as is very true for the Indigenous community in Canada, I think you're going to want to think twice about doing that.
Okay, and we'll certainly follow up on that with regards to thinking twice and what the thought should be and what thought should go into it. Leslie, generally speaking, you want to set the table for us from your perspective on, I think Brian's done a really good job of alluding to the reason why many Canadians are talking about this right now, but how are you processing this, or how have you been over the past number of years?
Yeah, so thanks again for hosting us. I think this conversation is long overdue, and I'm glad that we're finally having it. I believe that churches, and like Brian, I include synagogues, mosques, and temples in that. So all houses of worship should be treated like other organizations and should not be exempt from paying several types of taxes. And what we would like to see is advancement of religion in and of itself should not be considered a charitable purpose. And that includes pretty much all churches of the land. That tax break alone, that loophole in and of itself is worth over $3.5 billion per year. And if churches have a right to exist, they should do the work that they want to do, and some of that is good work, but they can be nonprofits like many other organizations that also do good works in the world.
So, Brian, maybe the question should be: should churches, and again, I think it's important to establish what you did, which is that this is not an attack or some sort of a focused initiative against any denomination or any particular faith group. We'd be talking about any church or house of worship that would be exempt from federal income taxes in particular. Should the question more be, should churches meet the same criteria as other nonprofits before tax exempt status is determined?
Well, I mean, let's actually talk a little bit of numbers for a minute. So Leslie and I share a love of rational thinking and reason, and I think that's one thing that I've heard good things about Leslie, and I think that's something that we share. So let's actually get some of the numbers on the table. When we're talking about the charitable refund given by the federal government, if that's the one we're talking about. There's other ones, municipalities and so on, but we're talking about $3 billion overall, and that is 0.7% of the Canadian budget overall. So if you're thinking about, okay, where are we going to start if we want to make the tax code more efficient? I find it very interesting that we're starting with religious communities, and we're not saying, for instance, looking at the federal budget and saying, why, for instance, are we giving money to venture capitalists? Especially when and everybody who's in a local community sees what churches, what religious communities do. They see it. They see the food banks, the soup kitchens. If you've been to a gurdwara, you understand that they feed hundreds of people every day. So I actually want to ask the question, so why are we starting with religion? Why wouldn't we start with something else? Particularly, I've got lots of data to back up the fact that I think we should continue to do that. I think there are good economic reasons for that. I think there are good, actually, political justice reasons for that. But one has to ask the question, okay, why are we doing this? Why are we starting with religion? It seems to me, Leslie, that there's a certain anti-religious sentiment that is driving this poll, that is driving this. And we've seen this from other people as well. They said they just don't like religion. And, your center, has noted, you've called religion things like a drug, like human trafficking, things like that. I just don't think that's actually accurate. And I think if we were really talking about rationalizing our tax code, we'd probably want to start somewhere else.
Leslie, why do we start with religion? For a lot of people, is it like Brian's saying, they're against the premise of churches in the first place?
There are certain people that are anti-religious and have that particular bias. But I don't think we're starting with religion. This is part of the conversation. This isn't the reason we're talking about this today is not from a general sense that we want to reform the tax code. The reason we're talking about this today is because we have found over 1,000 bodies of kidnapped children. The residential school system was horrific government policy that was enthusiastically executed by the Christian churches of Canada. And the Truth and Reconciliation Commission several years ago said that they had documents that estimated 4,000 children were killed or died while in care of church-run residential schools. We have now found over 1,000 of those remains. And that's why we're having the conversation about taxing churches today. Why should organizations that have committed such atrocities against our Aboriginal peoples of Canada continue to benefit to the tune in total, if we include the other subsidies, exemptions and deductions that religious organizations get, but nearly $5.5 billion in support each and every year.
Leslie, you're also including mosques and gurdwaras and other places that had nothing to do with residential schools. So I think you're being a little disingenuous there.
No.
The other thing to note is, I think it's important to actually pay attention to what Indigenous communities are saying. And so I just want to say again, absolutely atrocious what happened in the residential schools. And you're right that it was state policy. And in fact, I'm wondering why actually you're not saying we should just stop paying taxes, period, because it was the state that was doing it. You're right that it had enthusiastic support of the churches. It's profoundly unchristian. It's profoundly contrary to what the church teaches with regard to family. And so, look, I'm a Christian, I'm a deeply committed Christian, and I mourn that legacy. I think it's an absolute tragedy. When I consider what would be the case if it were my children, it causes me to be heartbroken, to understand that there are bodies buried without graves, proper burial, that they were buried without their children or without their families around is absolutely heartbreaking. But I think it's important to understand many Indigenous people are themselves Christian. If you look at the percentage of people who are Indigenous, 67% of them are Christian. And if you break that down, 57% of those 67% are Roman Catholic. So what you're doing, Leslie, is you're actually saying that the place of comfort, the place of community, the place of meaning, their connection to the Creator is actually something that they should be removed. And so I'm not sure exactly how that accomplishes what you want. I think it actually works contrary to that. The Indigenous community in this country is rightfully, and I think more helpfully spiritual than many other parts of our society. And I think that what we're talking about here is actually just a foil, just a tool for Leslie and his group to get what they've always wanted and get what they've always talked about. And I just think if we need to think deeper and a little bit more richly about what's actually going on in religious communities in this country.
Leslie?
Particularly in Indigenous communities.
Okay, so there's a couple of things. Brian, you're right. This is a long-standing policy for the Centre for Inquiry Canada. We do not view the advancement of religion in and of itself to be a charitable act. That is something that is clearly self-interested if you are a church or of any religion that you want tax support to do that. And it's something that we've been wanting to do for a long time. It's been something we've been trying to draw attention to for a long time. It is now part of the national conversation, and our arguments are the same as they have been for well over a decade. You mentioned earlier that people that there are food banks that serve hundreds of people, and organizations that alleviate poverty or that advance education are charitable, whether they are run by secular folks or whether they're run by the religious folks. So I have no problem with any of that. As far as the Indigenous communities or the percentage that you quoted about Indigenous people that identify as Christians, I think that is in large part due to the violence perpetrated upon them. They were ripped from their families. There are 150,000 Indigenous children kidnapped from their families, from their parents, and brought to residential schools where they were inculcated with Christian theology, completely contrary to the Aboriginal belief system, and that has stuck with them. But that is something born of violence and born of indoctrination. This is not something that it was a polite conversation between two groups, and then the Indigenous people saw the light and embraced it of their own accord. That is not the nature of how we got to the statistics that you quoted, Brian.
Leslie, I think.
Can I respond to that?
Well, sure,
Brian?
yeah.
Just quickly, I mean, I think that's somewhat patronizing, Leslie, to say that the beliefs of those who are holding on to Catholic faith do so because they've been duped or they've been brainwashed. Last time I checked, when I talk to Indigenous people, they are human beings like you and I who have the capability of having religious commitments on their own. And if you've ever been to church, you've ever been to a religious service in an Indigenous community, you'll know that in many places, these are actually places where their culture is perpetuated. In fact, the fact that the Cree language and other languages are present, that scripture is being translated into those, are actually places where they further their own sort of cultural and community beliefs. And let's also be clear about something here. The Christian religion offers a certain picture of a God who suffered and who was forsaken. And I think it's patronizing to say that people who hold to those beliefs do so simply because they were forced to, rather than actually making a decision and seeing something for themselves that offers them comfort, offers them a way to get beyond the wickedness that was perpetrated upon them, offers them a way to forgive, a way to move forward and actually to look there. So I just think that whole premise is highly patronizing and very, very similar to the type of thing that we've seen in the past. Indigenous people are people, they're human beings, and human beings have this need for this, and that's why you see it. And if we want to talk the money stuff, Ryan, I hope we get to the money stuff. I've got lots to say on that.
Yeah, well, here,
I just think let's make sure that we're talking about people in their own right and not just imposing our own views upon them.
Absolutely. People should be able to make their own choices. And what we are talking about is giving people their own choice. And our position is not to eliminate the churches of the land, but simply to put them on equal footing with other organizations in the community. Let's end the tax loopholes that give over $5 billion every year to religious institutions.
And here's the thing is, like, I listen, I have all day for these types of conversations. Trust me, I love these types of conversations, maybe even more than the average person of religion and spirituality and community and all these kinds of things. But that's not really the question we're asking, is it? I mean, I don't actually see much disagreement between the two of you on Canada's legacy of residential schools. Both of you condemn it. Both of you are suggesting it's very anti-Christian. Both of you are suggesting, I think, to varying degrees, that there is some form of liability, perceived or otherwise, on behalf of religious institutions, the federal government, probably the RCMP, but that's not where we're going on this. But the question is, should churches be taxed, or should churches adhere to the same expectations that other nonprofits do when it comes to paying taxes? The advancement of religion, Leslie, is an interesting one that you bring up, because I think, Brian, we would all probably agree that a church's number one mandate would be the advancement of religion, correct? Number two may be altruism or Christ-like behavior or whatever your faith principles may be, following the holy scripture or the text of whatever you believe, whatever your doctrine is. But a church's primary role is advancement of religion. Now, the question is, should that preclude a church from paying taxes or not?
Well, I mean, again, I think that's a very sort of modern binary that just doesn't actually reflect the way that churches actually work. I don't go to church on Sunday, and my friends don't go to their synagogue on Saturday, or my Muslim friends don't go to prayers on Friday and say, okay, look, I'm doing advancement of religion now. And then when I go feed people or I go help somebody who's in need, that I'm doing something different. I think what actually happens is that it is a source. Senator Almodvar has said some good things about that. Religion is sort of the nuclear core of the charitable sector as a whole. We're talking about things like food banks and so on. And when you look at that, when you look at what actually religious congregations do, even in their own right with their own budgets, the serving of the community is at the heart of it. It's loving God, loving the neighbor. Those two things are inseparable. And so when you try to separate them in the sort of very modern way that Leslie's doing, it actually is seeking to do violence to the way that these people do their work. And I want to be very clear about that. If you look at the data, if you look at a church's budget, for every dollar given to the church's budget, it generates $4 worth of social good. And this is not just me doing this. This is actually scholars in University of Pennsylvania who are not religious by any means. And I think what they're realizing is that when it comes to things like addiction supports, when it comes to things like debt management, or whether it comes to things like abuse counseling, all those type of things, those emerge out of the advancement of religion. Those two things are inseparable. And if you're trying to separate them, you're going to run into all kinds of like parsing of churches' budgets and things like that. And you're not actually going to be able to find the difference, because for a religious person, the loving of their neighbor is absolutely tied together with, it's inseparable with loving God. And I think you start looking at the way congregations actually work in their communities, everybody realizes that, whether you're religious or not. Senator Almodvar, I don't know her religious commitments, but she's noted it. There are other senators who have noted that. And there's plenty and plenty of academic data that shows just how much churches contribute. And if you look at, I'm not talking churches either, synagogues, you look at Via Havta, for instance, which is a Jewish organization. We've got some on our Cardus.ca. If you look at our Koinonia project, it's just one of those things that shows how much religious communities use their faith, use their religious freedom to serve the community. You can even see it in the schools. Children who've gone to independent religious schools are actually more involved in their community. And so, again, I think this is one of those situations where there's a sort of bee in the bonnet of the secularists. And, look, I'm pro-secular as well. I think we need to have a pluralist state. But if you're looking at the good, it far, far, far outweighs any cost that you're talking about. Again, let's keep in mind that the cost is 0.7% of the federal budget. I think Canadians as a whole are getting a very good return on that.
Yeah, but I mean, 0.7% of a federal budget is not a small amount of money. Like 1% of a federal budget is an enormous amount of money. Let's point out a couple of things. First of all, an American think tank talking about, return on investment when it comes to tax-free status for churches. Are you talking about the tiny little churches in rural hamlets, or are you talking about Joel Osteen, right, showing up to his mega church driving his Ferrari? Like, there's differences in churches, and as a graduate of a private Christian school, right, from kindergarten to grade 9, as a graduate of Trinity Western University, let me say that while there are valuable programs that are hosted by churches, the number one reason why a church has a soup kitchen is to bring people into the church to lead them to the Lord. That's a fact. And I'll also say that there are private Christian institutions, including elementary, junior, and high schools. For example, when we talk about gay straight alliances that would refuse to have them or would push back, that's one example of discrimination that can occur. And I know that when it comes to altruism and tax-free status, I'm not sure that everybody has the appetite for that kind of a thing, Brian, right? I mean, some people would say that is problematic at its core.
Well, I think, Ryan, what you're doing is you're making distinction between good religious uses and bad religious uses. And I'm there for that. Let's talk about it. Joel Osteen's prosperity gospel doesn't seem to be in line with the gospel to me. And, certainly I think there's a certain call to love our neighbors that is true regardless of their sexuality, regardless of anything for that matter. And I think that, our deeply, most deeply held beliefs are actually at the core of that, the parable of the Good Samaritan. But I want to make a note. It's not an American think tank, Ryan, that we're talking about. We're talking about American scholars at, I think it's the University of Pennsylvania. His name is Ram Kanan, Famita Handy. They did a study of 46 Ontario churches. And when they found out who was using those community programs, they found that non-members, so people who didn't go to the church, were 4 times more likely to use those programs than members of the church were. And again, when we serve people, we don't serve them with some ulterior motive of bringing them into the pen. The whole business of religion is an encounter with the divine. And if you can provide a means to love somebody, nobody's going to say to them, and in fact, nobody does, as that study by Ram Kanan shows. We don't go and say, okay, you're going to get food if you become a Christian. That's just not the way it works. And if people are doing that, that seems to be out of line with our religion. But again, what you guys are talking about here is actually you're lumping the bad in with the good. You're saying that the bad is the reason we should get rid of all of the good. When again, we're talking about very small amounts of money on the expenditure of the federal government. It's $3 billion is what the federal government budgets for tax refunds for charity. And advancement of religion is a portion of that. So let's even call it, 50%, so $1.5 billion. It's a very, very small amount. And I struggle to understand other than an anti-religious bias that's present. And good. And let's be honest, I share some of that in many ways. I as a who's religious, I see the way it's been used badly, and I would loathe that. But again, it doesn't make sense. If we've got issues with our tax code, let's start somewhere else. I personally think we should start with the venture capitalists. But
sure, and we'll have those, and we have those conversations too. I mean, our live chat's really interesting right now. Some people are just saying we need to tax billionaires more, and that can be a separate conversation or part of the ongoing conversation. Let me say it's not new for me to hear the words anti-religious or even anti-Christian bias in conversations like this. But I want to establish that's not what this is. This is a conversation about tax exempt status for nonprofits, churches, and charitable organizations in Canada. When it comes, Leslie, to what you think the future might look like with this conversation, I mean, let's check back in here. This is just a live look at this unscientific, unofficial Twitter poll I've got going on. We've got about 1,100 votes right now, still holding strong. 9 out of 10 people say tax churches, 90%. But guess what, Leslie? I bet you that you and Brian and me, I bet you we'll all agree that there's no federal politician. We'll talk to the Iqaluit mayor in a second. He wants to take this on the municipal property tax front, but I'm not sure that any federal political leader would have the political will to try to pull this off. Do you? You actually think that someone would start this conversation federally?
That's a matter of political will, and I don't have enough insight into the mind of Justin Trudeau or his cabinet or really of the leadership of the other political parties to know where this sits on their agenda. I think that what they're going to do is listen to Canadians. So as you've mentioned, your Twitter poll is unscientific. It's unlikely to be representative of Canadians as a whole. But if this continues to be the major topic of conversation, if we continue to say that this is an injustice, the reason that advancement of religion is in and of itself something that is considered to be a charitable purpose is because it's something that we inherited from England. There was a decision in the late 19th century about what constitutes a religion, and we inherited that. So I think it's probably time for us just to update Canadian regulations at the Canada Revenue Agency to be a made in Canada decision, perhaps in the 21st century, and not something that we've inherited from England in the 19th. And what we're talking about is not just advancement of religion as a charitable purpose. That's worth $3.5 billion a year. We have the federal government directly subsidizing religious institutions to the tune of over $1 billion every year. They're exempt from property taxes, which you alluded to earlier. That's worth nearly $900 million per year. And the clergy residence deduction is worth over $100 million per year annually. All of these are documented by the Centre for Inquiry Canada's Cost of Religion series, which is published on our website. I encourage anyone who's interested in some of the details and the methodology of how we came up with these figures to look at that. It's not 0.7% of the federal government. It's 1.6 of the federal government budget. It's 3.5% of the Ontario's budget, over a third of what the city of Toronto spends annually. It works out to just under $145 per year per Canadian. So if you've got a family of four, you're subsidizing religion by almost $600 per year, which is not trivial.
Again, but let's be accurate in our use of terms here. I mean, subsidy is different than tax exemptions, and you know that, Leslie, as well as I do, right?
Yeah.
So subsidy is giving government money to a group, a particular group. That's not what's going on here. There are all kinds of tax exemptions and breaks and refunds for all different types of purposes. And the reason why governments have those in place is because they recognize there are social benefits that come from that. So for instance, the childcare tax credit is something that says, look, there's a social good, there's a public good that's being given here. And I think it's indisputable that there's a public good that comes from religion.
It is highly disputable. That point is highly disputable. I understand that you feel strongly, I feel strongly, and this is something that a lot of Canadians feel strongly on both sides of that question. Whether religion in and of itself is a public good, I would say is fair to characterize that as a highly disputed tenet.
Disputed, but the data back up the fact that it is. And so if you actually go and you look at what churches do, you look at what synagogues do, they have a profound public benefit, primarily for those who don't attend their congregations. And that's what I'm saying here. That evidence is not written by religious scholars only, or by religious scholars even primarily. That evidence is out there. You look at the role, so say somebody like Jeffrey Stout, who's a Princeton University scholar, when he looked at who was behind the big civil rights issues of the day, it's often religious communities that are doing that. And so, as I said, we have tax exemptions and refunds for all kinds of different purposes, ranging from childcare to capital cost allowances for business. And the reason why government puts those in there is because they recognize there's a public good. And even if we were to accept the full cost that the Center for Inquiry put forward, and we say that that's the real cost, that would be a very small cost for what is actually received by the public as a whole. And we've done work on that. We've looked at all kinds of studies. If you can actually look in the religion's contribution to the GDP as a whole, it's there. And that is written by people who, don't support religion, who may even be opposed to religion themselves. That data is there. And I think the fact that we're focusing on this one, and again, Ryan, I don't want to say that you're anti-religious or what have you, but I think we do have to ask hard questions about why are we talking about religion as opposed to none of the other ones? Are we saying that there's a perfect public good response for the capital cost allowance, which is a much, much bigger cost, I'd say, than religion? And so it may not be anti-religious bias, but we do have to ask the question, why are we talking about this one in particular?
Well, because, and the short answer, because Brian, you're a sharp guy, obviously, and you know that this is called whataboutism is what you're doing right now. The short answer is because we do almost 15 live hours of talk a week. And so other days we do talk about other things. But the fact is right now we're talking about this, and the onus is on you to explain why churches should not be taxed. Because that's the conversation we're having, right?
No. The onus is on those who want to take it away. And
well, sure, but you're here debating the other side, right?
Leslie's not making a compelling case. What Leslie is saying is that he doesn't think that it's appropriate for people who are religious to have a tax exemption. What I'm saying is that there's plenty of evidence out there by religious and non-religious scholars alike who've shown that there's a tremendous public good from religious communities, that this is acknowledged, this is acknowledged by people in Parliament. Senator Ahmedvar is the most recent. There are others who are out there who study charities, who study charitable purposes, and everyone acknowledges that. Imagine Canada, the largest association of charities that represents all kinds of charities, red and yellow, black and white, you name it, whatever color, whatever group, they represent them all. And they too recognize the sort of core nature of this. It's not something that we've inherited that we've just somehow forgot. There's an actual benefit to it that's there. And I would say that everybody in their local community can actually see. And so, I'm making the case, I'm saying that data is out there, and I'm saying that the case to get rid of it is not very compelling, to be frank.
Leslie, I know you're chomping at the bit here.
Again, so it's a strong claim that Brian is making, and there are studies that make that claim. But again, this is not settled in academia. To just pick one example, Phil Zuckerman has looked at charitable works and organizations and societies as a whole. And what he has found is the more secular that a country is, and by secular, I don't mean observant or not observant of the populace or the number of churches. By secular, I mean that government is neutral in matters of religion. It neither supports nor suppresses religious expression. It takes a neutral stance. So the more secular a society or a country is, the more it thrives. The healthier it is, people live longer, the wealthier it is. On just about every socioeconomic indicator, societies are better when government steps out of religion. It doesn't fund religion. It doesn't overly penalize it. It treats it neutrally. And that's actually true within countries. So we did a study, again, Bill Zuckerman did a study of the United States and found that the more secular state government is, the wealthier, the freer, the healthier, the more law-abiding that state was. And so simply calling for secular governance, state neutrality in matters of religion is correlated with success and with human thriving. And that's all that we're after here. I'm looking for everyone to be able to make their choices, and I'm not calling for the dismantling of houses of worship. I'm not looking for people to say that you cannot be a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim or a Hindu or a Buddhist or whatever in the public sphere. No, absolutely, there should be all voices. Canada is, compared to most other nations, pretty good when it comes to secular governance. But being a human institution, it can be improved, and that's what we're striving for here.
So Ryan, you may be surprised to say that I'm actually in largely agreement with Leslie. And in fact, the distinction between religious authorities and political authorities is one that was brought historically by Christianity. So it's one thing that, I'm very happy to support and very, in fact, is very core to what I believe. But I think what we need to be careful with some of the language we use. I think there's a difference between, there are types of secularism. Our scholar, Charles Taylor in Quebec noted that there are different types of secularism. There's a certain aggressive secularism that you see in Quebec. And I'm not sure if Leslie thinks if Bill 21 is an appropriate bill or not, but that's one that says, look, you can't wear your hijab, you can't wear your turban, you can't wear your yarmulke or your crucifix while serving in a public office, whether you're a bus driver, a teacher, or a judge. That's a certain type of secularism. That's one that is, says, secularism is defined as having no religious, no place for religion in that as far as it's the state. That's one view. There's another view, though, that actually talks about, I think it's a better view, in my opinion, that talks about sort of deep pluralism that recognizes that, yes, the state should be neutral and that the state should offer the same type of things to all types of groups, whether you're an atheist center for inquiry or whether you're a religious community that's, focused on Jesus or on Muhammad and Allah or what have you. And I think that that's the type of pluralism that we need to be looking for. That's the type of secularism I want. And I think that's present when you're talking about advancement of religion, that's available to all religions in Canada. If you're an atheist and you don't like that and you want to set up an advancement for secular or for atheist beliefs about what it means to be human and what it means to be society, that option is open for you as well. And
actually, it's not. Of course, you're able to create such an organization, but if you wanted to create a secular humanist organization and you wanted to create a charity, you can create such an organization. You can create an organization to advance humanism. Okay. But if you wanted your organization that advances humanism and humanist thought to be a charity, you cannot. Because advancement of religion requires a form of deistic worship, and humanism does not. It recognizes that the common bounds that we have as people are the source of morality and does not recognize the supremacy of the deity. And so there is an anomaly, there is a disparity between what you can do to advance a religious cause, a religious philosophy that acknowledges a God or deity of some kind or multiple ones. And if you were to found an organization and try to get religious status for advancing a philosophy that does not recognize anything in the supernatural realm.
Okay, so let me go on record and say that that's wrong, and that should be fixed. And I think we should fix that. I think that, we're all human beings have this deep desire to know who we are and what does it mean to be human being? What does it mean to do right? What does it mean to do wrong? How should we order our society? I think there are things that move beyond the individual, or if you want to make the case for the fact that it's internal to the individual, I think that's okay. What we're talking about here are belief systems that are comprehensive in nature. And if the state in Canada does not support the charitable extension of that charitable purpose to an atheist society, I think that needs to be changed. So, Minister Freeland, if you're listening, I want Leslie to be able to set up his own organization to get charitable status for it. So I hope the minister hears that, and I hope that I'm quite clear about that. But that's the type of pluralism, that's the type of secularism I want. That Leslie and I, and you and I, Ryan, and all of us can have these debates about what does it mean. And I think what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be right and wrong? And I think that's so critical to what makes Canada such a great place to live.
Absolutely. May we continue to have this conversation.
Amen.
Let me ask you this in closing. Fellas, first of all, I'm grateful for your candor this morning. I'm grateful for the spirit of this conversation. I would imagine that if, in best case scenario, the three of us would be sitting around a diner table having coffees and hashing this out. Kent Gunslinger on Twitter is one of those that's cast a vote here. And he says, church and state are supposed to be separate, but churches politicize the pulpit all the time. Time to make him pay up. Brian, in closing, let me say in closing for now, and I suspect that this is just planting seeds everywhere, which is awesome, and I hope that these conversations continue. Encourage people to use the hashtag RealTalkRJ if you want to chime in on this. I don't know how you'd enforce it. I mean, realistically, you couldn't. But do you believe that churches that are politically active should see tax-free or tax-exempt status at risk? Do you think that involved political advocacy? How significant do you think of an angle that is in this bigger discussion?
Well, again, I want to say there's good and bad types of political advocacy. If you're seeking insurrection and all the rest of that stuff, then certainly I've got a huge problem with it. But look, my church has been advocating for greater funding for Indigenous education. I think it's an abomination the way we fund it. Again, and so I'm saying, is that a problem? No, it's not. And I think that the key to realize again here, what religious communities are offering, what they do is they actually put forward a view of society. And I think that as Canadians, we are free to advocate for our view of society.
Brian, but hang on a sec.
Everyone else can too.
Sure, but what I'm saying here is that, a church that has I'm getting messages here from people. This will sound very specific because it is. It's a message from an audience member that says that he went to his men's prayer breakfast at his church and they were selling UCP memberships, like political party memberships at the prayer breakfast. That kind of stuff, let's be honest, happens all the time. Should that be relevant, or is that relevant in this discussion? I'm talking specific political partisan support.
Well, look, if you're selling partisan memberships at your prayer breakfast, you need to have a chat with your council. That's well out of line. I don't think that you should be you shouldn't be doing that. I think the merger of religion with nationalism doesn't end well. And I'm saying this as a religious person, doesn't end well for religious communities. It doesn't end well. You end up getting used. And we've seen that in Russia. We see that in Iran. We see that in other places. China, that has the three patriotic churches, or the 3P movements that are trying to actually use religion. I would say to that person who's selling them, watch out, you're about to get used, and keep your eye focused on something that's deeper and more meaningful. And that's going to be there in 1,000 years instead of the one that's going to get voted out in the next election.
Leslie, I want to give you a chance to wrap this up with a bowl. I'll give you both of you a chance to do it. But do you believe, let me ask you the same question, should political activism or involvement be a relevant talking point in this debate?
Well, let's not have churches as charities, and they can do what they want as a nonprofit institution. But let's make it not relevant. I think that Brian and I share a similar vision of secularism. We want to have lots of different voices, and we both want government to be neutral. I agree with Brian that when religious institutions and political institutions get too commingled, that leads to problems for both politics and the religious institutions. So let's keep them separate, and let's not have government favor one religion over another or faith over non-belief. Let's keep government neutral. And so all we're advocating for is an application of that principle, where Brian and I seem to be in agreement, to the particular case of the preferential treatment given to religious institutions to the tune of $5.5 billion per year. Let's remove those loopholes and let the churches thrive on their own merits.
Brian, we'll give you a last word on this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And Leslie, I appreciate this conversation. I've heard good things about you, and you didn't disappoint. So I'm glad.
Thank you very much, Brian. It's a pleasure meeting you today.
Yeah. And so here, I'll just say this again. I actually think Minister Freeland needs to open the door. I actually think neutrality is better served when there are more voices seeing the support. And I know if the type of conversation that your organization foments is this type of thing, I think you are doing a public good, and it's sort of an outpouring of your deeply held beliefs. And I would say that you deserve the right to be treated as a charitable organization that right. And I would say, let's have that. Let's have more of that. I think it's demonstrable that, when we're talking about things like charitable refunds and so on, what we're talking about is, do they provide a public good? And I think the answer to that is absolutely yes. It's, as I said, for every dollar spent by a religious congregation, $4 is a benefit, public benefit is being received by it. And I think it's well worth it. I think it's a very, very small price to pay for the encouragement of the plurality that we have in this country, which is, I think, at the core of what makes it such a great place to live.
That's Brian Dijkema from Cardus. You can check him out at cardus.ca. Leslie Rosenblood's joined us from the Centre for Inquiry Canada. You can check them out at centreforinquiry.ca. Thanks for this, gentlemen. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
That
it was a pleasure.
Right there was exactly what this show is all about. Right there. Right there. Right there. Two guys that think the other is totally out to lunch, but they totally respect one another. They brought their talking points to the table. I know some people are banging their heads on the table. Some people probably that think that Leslie's making no sense, and some people that think that Brian's making no sense. But here they are, back and forth and advancing the conversation and making us think about things, which I really appreciate. It's always tough for me in conversations like that, because I kind of want to let the experts talk. And then I kind of have all my own thoughts, and we've got some great comments here on the live chat. And of course, the hashtag's going off at Real Talk RJ. We'll keep that conversation going. I don't think, man, there's a lot we could dig into there. I don't think that the argument is settled. I don't think that you have consensus that religion unequivocally provides a public good. I think you'd have a lot of people that would say our community would be in really tough without our church, or without that synagogue, or without. I think of Sikh truckers and what the Sikh community has done for people through the course of this pandemic, and amazing community rallies. And I think of some of the work that happens, in Christian churches, and we take a look around at different congregations, out of synagogues, the community action and the services that are provided. Sure, absolutely. 100% undeniably. When there's wildfire, when there's flooding, religious communities oftentimes open their door. Unless you're Joel Osteen, right? You don't want to get muddy footprints on the expensive carpet. You don't open up your church if you're Joel Osteen and there's hurricanes rolling through. But most other people would, or many other church congregations would. At the same time, you talk to people that are survivors of sexual abuse at the hands of priests. You talk to people that grew up gay, that were subjected to we were just talking about conversion therapy. We talked about that with Matt Ashcroft. What was that, last week, I think, on the show? You can look back in our archives and find that. Anybody that's been, subjected to what they would describe as, or what is undeniably discrimination because of religion, would certainly push back on the assertion that religion undeniably provides a public good. You'd have many people that would push back on that and argue against that. The question is, I think that you need to take honestly in a conversation like this. And I know, Sarah, let's pull back the curtain just for a second, because you had considered, we'll pull back the producer's curtain for a second, because you had considered having a tax lawyer, an expert on the panel as well, a third voice on the panel to sort of try to keep the conversation focused on. We don't want it to be too boring. No offense to tax lawyers, and we're lucky to have people smart like you. But the conversation can very quickly, and me as a moderator, I'm trying to be careful about that, because the conversation can quickly become, is there value to religion? Or is there reason for religion? Or what is mankind's inherent spirituality, and what sort of community are we drawn to? And these are all wonderful conversations. I told you guys about a campfire I stood around a couple of months ago until literally sunrise, where we debated these types of things, and I love those conversations. But that's not this conversation.
Right. And
This conversation is about taxes.
precisely. And I really did want to bring the tax expert, but not surprisingly, they weren't really wanting to weigh in. It was tricky trying to round somebody up. So I think that there was a little bit of stickiness. It got stuck in the place of status quo, where we are right now, and saying that there is value being brought by religious organizations that have charity status. But what I would love to know is, the step, if we were to look at it and say, okay, so if they didn't have that, and that money that is not going towards infrastructure, that's not going to, property taxes, if that actually goes towards property taxes, what other social services would be possible? We don't know.
Right. In other words, you could, non-faith-based charities could benefit from tax infusion, right? Or an infusion of tax revenue from churches or religious communities, right?
Yeah.
Keith says that conversation is how I want to start every Monday. Good, respectful discourse. Meantime, Scott says, I don't think that conversation was as good as Jesperson thinks it was. Okay. Well, not everybody believes that we have solved all of the world's problems, which is totally fine. One other thing that I thought was kind of funny, and Brian Dijkema is a sharp guy. Both of them are, but Brian, I would love to just sort of, like, as they say, iron sharpens iron. I'd love to have an extended conversation with that guy. But he says, hey, listen, in this conversation, you're looping in the good with the bad. Yeah, that's what you do, right? When you're talking about things like tax policy or political policy, or when you're talking about organizational structure or whatever we're talking about, if you think about it, we're talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and how it all plays out. That's kind of the whole point of the whole show, and the bigger picture, the bigger purpose of these conversations. Appreciate the comments on the live chat here, as well as we'll keep this. I feel like, I don't know, I'm not going to say I'm disappointed with the results of our unofficial unscientific Twitter poll, but I like it's like watching a hockey game too. I'll refresh it. We've got about 1,430 votes. It's holding strong. 9 in 10 people say tax churches. 90%. This is like watching a hockey game that's like a 5-0 blowout. It's no fun. I like the back and forth. I like when the Twitter polls kind of move and they gain some momentum through the day, and all of a sudden, the no crowd is gaining some ground, and then the yes crowd pulls away. Looks to me here like, there's an appetite in this unscientific poll. 90% would be an overwhelming majority. I'll tell you how many federal political party leaders will go on the record and campaign on taxing churches. Exactly 0.
0.
There is not a chance in hell, if hell exists, that federal political party leaders would ever start talking about taxing churches.
This poll is kind of reminiscent of the Stanley Cup Finals, actually.
It is, in a way.
It's kind of eerie.
It is. If you think about it, I mean, now's the time. Don't actually do this. Do not do this. But now would be the time to put $1,000 on the Habs, because the odds would be so wild if they won 4 straight. You would be able to pay off your house. But don't do it. It's a terrible idea. There are better ways to spend your money, like visiting RyanJesperson.com. Check this out. I'm going to share my screen. If you click on even if you're listening on the podcast, it's so easy to find. You just click on the sponsors tab right at the top of the page. A little message from me, and then we go down to our presenting sponsor. And then these are all the companies and the groups that we're proud to do business with. You see right here, Campers Village. Click on the link under the sponsors tab at RyanJesperson.com, and it's going to take you directly to their summer sale. It's on right now through till July 11th. You basically got till the end of this week to get up to 40% off the top outdoor gear available. So whether you're shopping for footwear or clothing or car camping or backcountry camping and hiking, they've got all the gear. They've been trusted by Canadians, in particular Albertans, Martin's, 2 stores in Edmonton, 1 down in Calgary, family owned, trusted for years and years, but at campers-village.com or linking to it via our website. They'll ship anywhere in Canada. Most orders over $49, so we'll say most orders ship for free. You can check out more details online. The Campers Village Summer Sale is on now. Also, a big shout out to the team at Dairy Queen of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. Sam, can we call up these photos? There was a bit of a debate that unfolded in our backyard just yesterday.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So we're sitting around the fire. We're having this beautiful, beautiful afternoon as a family, and little man Wyatt says, you know what we should do is grab these peanut buster bars, these buster bars out of the freezer. I said, yeah, for sure. We've always got it. You got to have some Dairy Queen locked and loaded in the freezer, right?
Always.
So here's the photo. Here's how I'm eating my buster bar. Okay, I'm hitting it hard from the top. You can see sort of like the evidence of my heavy breathing over it. You see there where you see that? And I'm coming down on it. I'm coming sort of like how a helicopter would land. That's how I come down on the buster bar, right? So I look over at my beloved, my soulmate, my life partner, Carrie Ann, and this is how she's eating her buster. Sam, you vociferously disagree here, obviously. Can you see what she's done? She's gone around the whole thing like
She has removed all of the chocolate holding the thing together.
and she's created like a soft serve ice cream cone.
Yeah.
Not quite
It's
soft.
going to fall all over her hand.
It's not like the Dairy Queen classic soft serve, but
No.
she's created an ice cream cone minus the chocolatey shell. And so I said, I'm just going to put this out to real talkers. What I'm doing here is hoping to make myself, because we got into a bit of not a real one, but a bit of a tiff over it. I mean, Wyatt Rudy's sitting there like he doesn't care. He's just hammering away on his Buster bar. He doesn't care.
He doesn't hear a thing.
No, you can find Buster bars, Blizzards, Dilly bars, 2 hamburgers for $5, 2 cheeseburgers for $7 at the Dairy Queens in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, Y Gardens, and Baseline Road. Just tell them that Jespo sent you. Tell them that you're a real talker. We've got some ground to cover coming up in just a little bit. We're going to get back to a Y Station question of the week we put in front of our audience members. Hundreds of you chimed in on it. We appreciate it about Alberta's upcoming referendum question on equalization. We'll give you some insight. If you're a Patreon supporter of ours, you've already seen the top line report. It's in your email inbox. But we'll get into that before we say goodbye today. But we wanted to touch on something that's making news right now. As a matter of fact, it's making news in our home city, the city where we broadcast from, Edmonton, Alberta, the capital, of course, of the province. In late June, just late last month, a number of days ago, Lorelei Mullings from Enoch Cree Nation started a protest just off 128th Street, 115th Avenue. Now, the specific location doesn't matter if you're outside of Edmonton. What does matter is we're talking about the location that formerly was the Charles Camsell Indian Hospital. It's under construction. It's under renovation. It's being turned into residences. But here's the thing. So after World War II, the Canadian government decided to use the property as a tuberculosis hospital. In particular, it served Indigenous people from Canada's north. Late 1945, patients started to arrive, and the hospital officially opened the next summer in August of 1946. So government agents and medical teams would fly into northern communities. They would x-ray residents, and sometimes, even forcibly, they would remove those with TB, tuberculosis. And they were flown to hospitals in southern communities, relatively speaking, like the Camsell Hospital. Babies were born and baptized there. Children grew up there. In some cases, friendships started. Patients were cured, but not everybody made it home. In fact, some families from northern communities in this country are still looking for loved ones, searching hospital records across the country. Now, some former patients are buried at the Aboriginal Cemetery in nearby St. Albert, Alberta. But the truth is there are many stories of patients being abused. The emotional trauma cannot be understated. During the 1970s, the need for a dedicated tuberculosis hospital slowly declined, and the Camsell became a general hospital until it was decommissioned in 1993. Lorelei Mullings has been demonstrating there, including a gathering of about 50 people back on July 1st, kind enough to join us live on this morning's show. Welcome to Real Talk, and thanks for making time for us, Lorelei.
Hello, thank you.
What prompted you? I mean, you were down at the Camsell. Some people, there had been rumblings. We were getting messages in our inbox. I was getting text messages on my personal phone, people saying, how long until this national conversation about residential schools starts to include the Charles Camsell Hospital in Edmonton. Has this been on your radar, no pun intended, for quite some time?
You know, myself and my friend Andrea Jenkins, she was also the one who started this with me. We woke up Friday, June 25th, and we said they needed, like she suggested, she said they need to check the Charles Camsell. That was an unmarked grave site. And I said, yeah, and we wanted to know, like, what are they doing about it? And we didn't want that area to get forgotten. And plus of all the wrongdoings done there. So we decided just say, well, there's just the two of us, let's go protest. And we decided just that day that morning when we just got the numbers for the 751, and we said the only thing we can do is just go protest and bring awareness to everybody. And then after hearing everyone that has come out, we were there for 7 days, every day at 7 p.m. And all the stories that came out about the Charles Camsell, we got the awareness. We want justice now.
What were people telling you? Can you share some of the stories?
We had an elders come by on the first night, and he was from Pagani, and he had mentioned that, yeah, there is bodies buried here, but there's not even bodies buried here. They buried them in the fort. They buried them in the army grounds, or the barricades are there. There's other places that they buried these bodies. He was told by other elders. So a lot of these stories been passed down of what was happening. Also, I have spoken to my cousin who worked in archives, and we know that some of those bodies came to Enoch. I'm a Moran. I'm from Enoch, and we known there was a one unknown gravesite, but I confirmed it with somebody else, with my mother, and she said no, they found two. So what they used to do is bring the bodies to Enoch and drop them off there. But the people that I've talked to and we spoke to, they said they never even heard back. Their families went to these hospitals and they never came back, so they never even knew that they died or anything like that.
Was this something that, I mean, yourself as a young girl or growing up, was this part of conversation among, yourself and other community members, or is this something that you were made aware of or learned about more recently?
I am aware about residential school. I am aware about the Charles Camsell. I was born at the Charles Camsell. I had a friend talk to me the other day. It was, why were you born at the Charles Camsell and nowhere else? I said, well, I'm an Indian. When you were known as an Indian, you didn't get a choice to go to the Misericordia or go to the U of A or go anywhere else. You were sent to the Charles Camsell. And even recent as younger people in their 40s and 50s, they even have stories about how they were treated badly in the Charles Camsell.
We did reach out to local architect Gene Dubb, who owns at least a portion of this project and is involved. And I want to cite reporting by The Star, where Mr. Dubb has confirmed that he has hired personnel to undertake ground-penetrating radar scans of at least one portion of that site where no excavation work has yet taken place. Is this a step in the right direction, Lorelei? I mean, ultimately, what are you hoping to see here longer term?
That's one area that they build up. They shouldn't even have touched that area. I want to know the data that was brought forward by Mr. The contractor,
Mr. Dubb.
Mr. Dubb. I spoken to Trinity Brandon Demuse. She came on the last day. She's 21 years old. She signed a protest. She started a protest 7 months ago, this young girl, and stopped the development of that area. When we reached her, we found that, because we were trying to make our own protest, but then we found our own petition, but we found that one. So we started sharing. She was at 205, and I'd have to say, I checked this morning, she's at 1,800 that signed the petition. She has emails from Mr. Dubb back and forth. So Mr. Dubb has changed his story many times.
He did tell the Star, he said at the time that they purchased the building in 2004, quote, at that time there wasn't nearly as much interest or concern about burial grounds. He says, I think now we're sort of shocked into finding that we should investigate this more seriously. Did you have, I mean, in the number of days where you sat in demonstration, a powerful demonstration outside the hospital, I know you were joined by elders in telling us in particular on July 1st, about 50 people there alongside you. Were there any interactions with developers? Did local community members, nearby residents come by and discuss this with you? Do you believe that this is a conversation that would extend into the so-called mainstream population? Did you get a sense that your message was resonating with people that may have just been passersby?
When you arrived, there was 50 people, but over that day, the last day, we had over 150 people. Over the 7 days that we were posted there, we had over 350 people we reached out to. We had people across that lived in those apartment buildings come and drop off water. We had young girls, young men come and drop off water, come and drop off donations. We had all the chiefs in Treaty 8 that had a meeting. We had Chief, sorry, I don't want to forget their names, Chief Ivan Swan, that had put me on live on his Facebook. And then all of a sudden the Grand Chief Noski, Arthur Noski, he came by and dropped us a cooler, and there's a number of chiefs, our chief from my reserve, Chief Billy, Counselor Jared Morn. There was just a number of people that, Regional Chief Marlene Portres. So there's a number of people that came out and supported us. Elder Taz, my two uncles that helped us with guiding ceremonies. So there was so many people that came out or just stopped by when they heard our story on Facebook, and then we developed an event, and then we had developed a group. There were so many people that started coming out. So it was our social media, and there was one of the workers that worked in that area, and that's where it got big from as well. I don't want to mention his name because he's been getting a lot of negative feedback. And I don't like it because, we should be allowed to share our stories. We should be allowed to let them know the truth. And it hasn't been, I feel really upset because people didn't have a problem when they were doing ghost tours in the Charles Camsell. Everyone didn't have a problem. Oh, ghost tours, it's haunted. This place is haunted. I don't say it's a ghost. I don't think it's haunted. Those are spirits that were left there and forgotten. So when I speak about those spirits, they want to be found, and we know that they're there, and we know we want the truth to be known, because all we have is our voice. I'm not trying to get anything out of this. I'm just we're two women that want to be known, to share the stories and to let it be known, because he knows where we are. We're on his site. We're on our site on Treaty 6 territory, but he hasn't come out to come and talk to us. Right now, I have Lena, that is posted there. She has offered on the last day. She wants to take the next 7 days. So she's there right now. We are on day 11 at 12815 115th Avenue Northwest at the Charles Camsell on the west side. So this is what's been happening. A lot of beautiful things been happening. There's been things that I can't even explain, but being there with all the people that come out, and a lot of big support from Treaty 8, huge and friends of, it's getting so good that, when you do something so positive, some people want to bring out the negative, and you can't let that bother you.
Lorelei, it's interesting. You were discussing the ghost tours and the haunted facilities, and we were talking about that at the very beginning of the show today on how, and I don't necessarily think that many people, I can't speak for anybody else, but I don't think people were trying to be offensive. I don't think that people were trying to whitewash or gloss over the history of the hospital. I think that most people just didn't know. I think that most people didn't realize what it was. And you're right. It's been described as a haunted, almost a destination in this city in so many ways as other alleged haunted destination has been targeted by people on Halloween or any other night. And I don't think that disrespect was intended. I just don't think that most people were aware of it. Now, that's an entirely different conversation about how many things people haven't been aware of lately, but it's been interesting.
I had people come by actually that done these ghost tours or checked it out at the Charles, and they were young people and different ages, and they actually came forward when we were there and were crying and expressing how sorry they were to do that.
Wow. Is that one of
They came to apologize.
What does that mean to you?
It means that, they felt bad because they didn't realize, they weren't educated to know what that hospital really meant. It was heartache. It was a bad place for our people. And this is just one hospital, right? So there was other hospitals in Canada. So it meant a lot that they had to acknowledge that they did wrong. And, I'm sure the people that were there, or the spirits, they felt that apology.
Lorelei, can I ask about, you said that you've witnessed or you've experienced some beautiful things in the days that you've been there. In a way, although it's emotional, I would suspect that you may characterize people coming by, civilians coming by to apologize for a somewhat frivolous tour through that hospital might be one of those beautiful moments, in the sense that it indicates that people there are personal acts of reconciliation, small acts of reconciliation happening. Would you agree or characterize it as that?
When you have somebody come up to you and you, like every night we smudged about twice, the beginning of our ceremony and at the end of our protest when we were leaving, just to, keep that positive energy, right? And I don't even want to say the number of people, but first time people that have smudged, they wanted to learn, or they were scared, and we said anyone can do this. We welcome people with all our hearts. Indigenous people are very welcoming people. It's just that we get a lot of backlash from what has been done to us, and they look at, there's a lot of good in us, and we have a lot of stories, we have a lot of things that we can share with people, but you just need to get to know one of us, and we're so welcoming.
Lorelei, I know that you're going to tell me, I already know in advance, you're going to tell me that you don't speak for an entire community of people, that you're not going to speak for Indigenous people across the province or in Canada's northern territories, and none of it Northwest Territories and elsewhere. But you personally, we had a fascinating conversation a while back with former Chief Sophie Pierre, who was talking about this St. Eugene mission. It's a residential school that by a consensus vote in among some First Nation communities, a unanimous vote of support to convert this former residential school into a hotel and a golf destination. It's actually a fascinating project. I know many people have many different feelings about visiting it and the power that would come with that visit, the emotional experience that it would be. But you personally, if Ground Radar does determine definitively that there are unmarked graves on this property, what would you like to see the future of this property look like?
There's a lot of things that need to be done. Is this just where you're explaining, or still we're talking about the Charles Camsell?
Well, I'm just asking, like, if Ground Radar shows that there are unmarked graves at this location, in your perfect, I can't say perfect world, but what would you like to see happen?
It needs to be acknowledged. we're still waiting for apologies, and we haven't gotten any apologies. There has to be ceremony. I haven't done any ceremony because it's not the time for it. I know I've been inboxed about certain things that we should be doing, and this is not the time to be doing that until it's been checked out. We need the justice to of what our people faced in the hospital. It needs to be well known, because we've kind of forget it was a hospital, but there's so many stories that people need to share. It's incredible. It's very heartbreaking of what people have faced in that hospital, and I would like them to be able to share and help them heal. The main thing that we would like to see is a monument, something that shows, the respect that we deserve as Indigenous people, as people that, tried to fight this TB and got sent to this hospital. And, a lot of us didn't come out alive, but, the mistreatment of everybody. The other thing, what was big in there was the 60 scoop, sterilization. That's a big thing. We have all these kids, and they're probably like in their 50s now, trying to look for their parents, trying to look for their home fire, and they're lost because when they were in the hospital and their mom was underage or had no father to put on the birth certificate, or were Bill C-31, there was a lot of things that happened, and they were taken away from their family. And then after that they put them on the 4th floor, which people said the 4th floor was very, very haunted. But the women that were in there, how are you going to feel if your child was taken away from you, your baby, or you didn't even get anything, just taken? Of course, you're going to go mad or crazy, or in such a depression. And that's what happened. But people don't realize that. So the awareness is being brought out, but most of all, we need justice now.
How long do you intend to continue this demonstration?
I was only, my friend and I were only doing the 7 days. We wanted to do it for Canada Day, the last day. And it was a lady, when I spoke at the ledge to introduce myself and what we were doing, and about people having one voice, and their voice is very powerful, just use it. After I got off the stage, the lady seen me, and she said she was going to do the next 7 days. So now, whoever wants to step up, go ahead. I'm honored to do that. Everything that we've bought for the protest or been donated, it's been passed down. So we don't take anything. Any of the water that's been donated, we've been passing it down. I bought an extra cooler. So 2 of the coolers that are at the site are from Chiefs. And I bought chairs. The other beautiful thing I have to mention was the last day, like, we had drummers and singers and different singers. We had teachers. We had all amount of different people, family and friends, elders, just lots of known artists, Georgina Lightning and Stephanie Harp. We had a lot of people that have a voice in Canada, so they were very supportive of us. They are also activists as well. So there's a lot of beautiful things that are happening. So I'm sure someone else is going to step up again. I am leaving for the month, but I'm hoping to see it continue. I'm going there tonight, actually, just to go sit down and show my support to Lena and see how she does. And I told her it's up to her, what she wants to do. And I just kind of gave her a lead of what we were doing. I know on the weekend, maybe she didn't get much of a crowd. I'm not sure. I wasn't there. But I know because of ceremonies going on right now, it's hard to get people out on the weekend.
Sure.
Just because you have sun dances and powwows right now.
Well, Lorelei, I mean, you've got people talking, and this is going to get people talking even more. We really appreciate your time and your availability here. May I ask you, in closing, just a personal question in the quiet moments when there maybe isn't a big crowd there? when you're on those grounds. I would imagine it takes an emotional toll on you. I would imagine that your mind is working 24/7 as you're trying to process, and as human beings, we imagine, as you gaze up into those windows, or you try to walk in the shoes of people who have been there before. What has the emotional toll been like, or the personal experience for you in the quiet moments?
The last 2 nights meant a lot to me, just because there was always 4 women sitting there. I was sitting with Andrea and my 2 cousins, and we sat there and prayed and talked. One of my cousins, she opened the chair for somebody, and she believes that our grandmother was with us. She was sitting with us. She left us in 2002, but she believes that she was sitting with us, and I believe that too, because I felt comfort holding next to the chair. I felt like she was with me. The last night we were there, we stayed there late till 1 o'clock, 1:30. We stayed late, and people came by. It's just wonderful how they come by. And the last night I got to smudge with my nieces and show them what to do and give them some tobacco and just let them pray. And having my cousins and my nieces there, it means a lot, because you're passing down what's happened, and they'll remember that moment.
And here you are. I mean, you're sharing your culture. You're educating people. I know you're going to find a way, because you've been talking to our production team. You're going to find a way to shrug off credit for this. You don't want to take credit for this, but you really are getting people talking. And this is an example of very powerful citizen action, and I commend you for it, Lorelei. We do have some local audience members, people that are tuned in from Edmonton or the Metro Edmonton region, that are curious to know if they would be welcome. And if so, what time they should show up. It sounds to me like 7 p.m. weeknights. Is that what you would say?
Every day so far. Lena's last day will be on Thursday, but every night at 7 p.m. you can go down to 115 Avenue, which you'll see Lena there. Lena's a beautiful woman. She'll be very welcoming. Bring your chair, bring your blanket, and just listen. I don't know. We don't ever have a planned agenda. It's just whoever shows up and we talk and discuss. Yeah. I'm excited to go there tonight. If you want to come out and meet me, you can come out and meet me there. I'll be there tonight. And I'm pretty sure someone will take over after Lena's done, but it is a process. They said women have a voice, and all I can see is strong Indigenous women that I meet, and I want to be part of that circle, because it means a lot to do something for my people and not just sit still. It's to tell people and make awareness. That means a lot. And it's not even in Canada. We're reaching people across the globe. Yeah. So we are on TikTok, and TikTok has gone viral with, me and Andrea used to go live, and we had people in the Caribbeans. I have family in Jamaica, so we had a big crowd there. We have people from New Zealand, supporting us, supporting our people over here. We have people from the Philippines, El Salvador, Croatia, all over the globe that are reaching out to us. So if you are in Edmonton or you're stopping by, come by the Charles Camsell and come and bring your support. Donations are welcome if you want to bring food or whatever. I know it's a hard thing to sit there, but she's doing a great job, and I'm just happy about that. Also, I'm happy about Trinity and the campaign. So if you haven't already yet, please sign the petition, and it's at change.org and Charles Camsell. You'll find the petition. Just sign, please. And we're just she had a goal of 500, and we're at 1,800. So I'm like, let's make it 5,000.
Yeah, you're almost at 1,900, and I see that it's being signed as we speak. So I think
also, without disrespect, I forgot to mention Chief Papa Chase Calvin Bruno. He has worked on this as well. He's one of the ones that started working with the council and shutting it down and getting them to search. I don't want to forget his name. I haven't met him, but I reached out to him personally, so I don't want to forget people's names.
But I mean, this is you're getting. I mean, you mentioned Grand Chief Arthur Newski, who's on our show, by the way, back on June 24th. A fascinating conversation. I you know what, we should reach out and we should talk to him again, because he's actually a devoutly religious man. I want to talk to him about some of the things that are going on around churches today. I don't want to open a whole other can with you, Lorelei. I know we've got to let you go here, but I mean, you've got Chief Billy Moore, and you've got I mean, you even mentioned Elder Taz. Like, everybody knows who that is, and Taz Boucher is like wonderful. And
I went and protested with her. We went walking down the White Ave on plus 40. My one son, he was carrying the makeshift coffin with a child in it, and it was powerful. It was very powerful. I'm really blessed to have met Taz and have her support. She came out one night, and I had to go and protest and walk with her on Canada Day. I was very tired that day when you met me, but it was very I felt good about it.
Yeah, well, you stand next to her, you'll receive energy via osmosis. I met Elder Taz. I think it was honestly 15 years ago. I think it was at what I believe was an inaugural march down 97th Street in Edmonton in honor of, I believe they called it the Missing Sisters March, but it was one of the earlier events that I can remember around the red dress movement and missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and she has long been an advocate. Anyway, I wanted to give her a shout out, because she's just a remarkable human being. Lorelei, I want to thank you for making time for us today. Again, we'll reference this change.org petition, Stop the Redevelopment of Charles Camsell Hospital in Edmonton, Alberta. If people want to check it out, people are going to just grind my gears if I don't ask. I'm terrible at TikTok. The truth is, Lorelei, but where can people find you on TikTok? What's your handle there?
My name is at Indigenous Diamond.
Okay.
You can look for me there, and also Andrea's at Mystique Diamond.
Okay.
We're part of a diamond family, or Diamond Nation, actually. And on Andrea's, you can see the video of one of the contractors speaking out. So if you want to go check that out, like and share and comment. Yes.
There you go. Lorelei Mullings, member of the Enoch Cree Nation, who's been demonstrating outside the former Charles Camsell Indian Hospital in Edmonton's North End on 115th Avenue. Thanks for joining us here on the show today. I would love, you know what? Before I let you go, let me read you a couple. Someone wrote in just to say, now this is real talk. But how about this from Kim, who says, I am so into these kind-hearted, honest, heartfelt guests who have no agenda other than revealing truth and asking for respect and acknowledgement of that truth. Bless her. That from Kim, who I'm sure speaks for many people.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi.
That's Lorelei Mullings.
I appreciate it.
You got it. We'll talk to you again, Lorelei. Thanks for this. You can let me know what you think about this. I mean, a lot of people are processing this right now, going, I had no idea. A lot of people, members of our relatively local audience, saying, I worked by there, I've driven by there, or I live around here, I live in the shadow of this place. Want to recognize our own technical producer, in this context, photojournalist Sam Brooks, who went by on July 1st. Those are your photos, Sam, that we were seeing. Can I say candidly, as a white guy, but as a community member, and what was it like for you to be there?
It was, quite honestly, I'd come right from just a small family gathering in my grandparents' house, and knew that I wanted to go take some photos that night, and stayed for probably about 2 hours. It felt like the right place to be. It felt like the right place to just be holding space on Canada Day. And I mean, it's a building with a tortured history that I see out my bedroom window every single morning.
Yeah,
and
you're close
I don't
to
know.
it.
I'm a block away. I live a block away from the Camsell.
Close to it.
There's a plaque on the east side of the Camsell where there's the bike path there that kind of talks a little bit about the neighborhood of Inglewood's history. And the section written about the Camsell is so incredibly revisionist and whitewashed. It talks about how the Indians called this our hospital. And it's so abjectly wrong. And it's such a misreading of the history of the space. So it's, yeah, it was.
You wonder
know,
how many
yeah.
plaques and markers and sort of contextual, sort of information zones will be redone or I believe there's like this national. People are talking about erasing history. This is exposing history. These are telling stories, and you wonder how many of those will be redone. I mean, I see. The statue of Queen Victoria, the big prominent one outside Manitoba's legislature, came down on July 1st. Gosh, I feel like 4 days away from studio with you two. We have so many. We haven't even talked about the Gulf of Mexico on fire. I don't mean to divert our conversation. There's just so much going on right now. But that statue of Queen Victoria and the Queen Elizabeth one came down as well. There's a lot going on right now. And people are demanding that history be recognized in a way. The stories, as they say, history, is told. History is written by the victors, right? And I know because I see it all around me and I feel it, that Canadians en masse have an appetite now, fueled by tragic history and recent epiphany for many people. But it's undeniable it's happening.
I couldn't agree more.
Can I read something?
Please.
I saw this. I can tell you. I can tell you want a minute to think, which is beautiful and wonderful, and that's the whole point. This is a post by somebody I do not know. It was shared with me, a woman by the name of Desiree Lavour. I don't know her personally. Someone shared this with me yesterday. She writes, I feel like a lot of people are still missing the mark. She's talking about residential school sites in particular. Despite being sympathetic and supportive of these babies being recovered, a lot of folks still have this notion that these are ancient crimes that have long passed. The majority of the people you complain about tarnishing your downtowns and your inner cities are residential school survivors. You post your 215 or your 751 or your 1323 or your orange profile photo. And then you go on to complain about encampments and tax money and petty crime and drug addicts and people sleeping in the streets while you're trying to enjoy your fucking scooter ride through the ice district. There are thousands who perished and need to be sent home and grieved. Yeah, but there are thousands more who lived through the nightmare and are actively and endlessly villainized for it every day of their lives. You're sad for those who were buried nameless, yet you want the survivors pushed out of your sight in the exact same way. If you want to honor the babies who never made it home, support the ones who did. Desiree Lavour, the author of that.
I mean, you look at affordable housing and how people say, not in my neighborhood. There's
Right.
a lot of NIMBY around that. And it's precisely, that's what affordable housing helps to find homes for folks. And I don't know, this weekend was just, I am a white settler. So, I mean, I found it very hard this weekend. I was very quiet on Canada Day. I didn't go out. I stuck to myself and I went on a walk with my dog. Just was reflecting and yeah,
It was interesting. It was an interesting dynamic on July 1st, right? Because there were people that, like Alberta's open for business. Across the country, many people are celebrating Canada Day. There's fireworks in the major cities, right?
Some of them.
Restaurants are open, patios are open, people are out. The weather was beautiful. And then you have this happening across the country. And like Lorelei pointed out as well, international attention. I mean, it's not... This is not a conversation confined to Canada. It was interesting to hear from former government minister and veterinarian Dr. Richard Starkey, who reached out to the show. I really appreciate that he's one of our audience members. He wrote in to talk at ryanjesperson.com. He said, I really enjoyed that segment with former Chief Sophie Pierre talking about St. Eugene Mission. He says, what an incredible leader she is, by the way. Compassionate, articulate, thoughtful. Wow. Coming from a guy that's compassionate, articulate, and thoughtful, that means something. He says, my wife Allison and I were out there a few years ago. He says, we didn't play that wonderful golf course and we're not much into casinos, but what we learned about the residential schools will stay with me forever. He says, you really should plan to take your family out there, Ryan. It's an amazing story how this group of First Nations have taken what was a very dark chapter in Canadian history and used it as a teachable moment. I talked to another friend of mine that has been out there, played the golf course, says it's wonderful. I said, I feel like, I was speaking candidly. I'll tell you what I said to him in the words. I said, I feel like staying out there would really mess with me. Like emotionally, I don't know. And he said, oh, it does. He said, it does. This is my buddy Troy says it does. He says, you're in there. And he goes, you're in your hotel room and you're wondering like what happened in this room. And he says, and the answer is maybe nothing, but maybe something. But he said he wouldn't take it back, wouldn't take the trip back. Let me also read the second part of Dr. Starkey's email. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about right now, but I always love feedback from audience members. Means a lot. He also, no surprise, Dr. Starkey heard our conversation with the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association president, Dr. Ferries, about veterinary and mental health. He says that conversation really hit home too. He says if you were to talk to most vets, almost all of us know at least one colleague who's taken their own life. He said, in my case, it hits really close to home. The vet who hired me out of veterinary school in 1983, Dr. Malcolm Gray, was past president of the Alberta Veterinary Medical Association, was a gifted practitioner. We were partners from 85 until his retirement in 90. We stayed in touch after playing golf. Says the last round I played was with Malcolm at Kananaskis in June 2002. And at that time, he was working for the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. He'd been helping vets in England manage the foot and mouth disease outbreak, and he told me how hard it had been, how hard it was to tell families that all the animals on their farm had to be euthanized in order to manage the spread of the disease. He had a heart for people, had a heart for animals, and I could tell that the experience had been very difficult on him. And 2 months later, I got a call from his daughter telling me that he had taken his life. She was asking me to deliver his eulogy. He says, and then your conversation on Real Talk soon morphed into people talking about their pets, with many stories about euthanasia of pets. Do you remember this?
How could I forget?
I mean,
Yeah.
that was one of our more candid. We didn't plan that. We didn't plan to have that conversation. People started sending us photos of their pets that have since passed, pets that are still with us. I think everyone's hugging their dogs and cats, and
Gerbils and
I don't think you
birds
hug
and-
budgies, do you? Or maybe you just gently kind of give them a little scratch behind the whatever those birds have ears. They do.
They have
kinda?
ears, yeah.
He says this is a really tough subject for veterinarians, and it's certainly one of the many factors that contributes to some of the mental health challenges. He said this is a worldwide phenomenon, by the way, in our profession. We're the only healthcare profession that's called on to provide care for our patients from birth onward, and then in some cases also asked to humanely cause the death of that patient. Wouldn't that be interesting to know on the human side if there's been an example in recorded history of a physician that would have presided over the birth of a patient, practicing obstetrics, and then potentially care for that patient through life and then assist in medical death. Wouldn't that be fascinating on the human side? He says, we're the only profession called on for this. Vets form strong bonds with their patients and their owners. Our profession demands compassionate, empathetic care, and it's not easy. He says, I'm reminded since returning to practice of how profound that human-animal bond is. Dr. Starkey references, he delivered a speech in the Alberta legislature back in April 2018. You can look for it online, about following the passing of his beautiful Bernese mountain dog, Liesel. He says, I gave a lot of speeches in 7 years at the legislature, but I still count that one among my favorites. And he said, and I really appreciated, Ryan, that you referenced Jimmy Stewart's appearance, Jimmy Stewart on Johnny Carson 40 years ago, that amazing poem about his dog, Bo. Doc says, it tears me up every time. He says, while we're talking about tearing up, check out Hans Wilhelm's children's book, I'll Always Love You. We always had this book in our clinic to help families coping with grief from the loss of their pets have tissues handy. Starkey goes on to say, I continue to enjoy the show. Sarah's a great addition to the team.
Aw.
Good luck with the Pisco Sour. I'll have to stop by Sea Change Brewing Co. and pick up a case on my next trip through Edmonton. That from Dr. Richard Starkey. Really appreciated that. I think the beer might be getting close to sold out, Doc, but I know a guy who knows a guy who could get you a 4-pack, so no problem there. Want to remind you that we're always keeping an eye on our hashtag Real Talk RJ. It's powered by the team at Park Power. They're in the internet, electricity, and natural gas game. They have been for coming up on 10 years now. So relatively speaking, a new player, but no reason or no wonder more and more people are finding reason to bring their business to Park Power. You want to save money? You want to support local? They profit share with charities in the region. I mean, who else does that when it comes to locally owned utilities providers? Parkpower.ca is where you can punch in our promo code 2021-REAL-TALK, and they'll give you $70 off your first bill, commercial, residential, whatever, at parkpower.ca. The team at Eden Landscaping, I mean, this is their prime time. They've got all their crews out working to bring your outdoor space to life. It's not too late to book a consultation with Mike and his team via landscapeedmonton.ca. They've got over 20 years of on-the-ground experience. You can visit their website to see some of the work that they've done. We're talking full project management, from plans all the way through excavation, stone and woodwork, retaining walls, water features, outdoor kitchens, irrigation, drainage, lighting. Sky's the limit with Eden Landscaping at landscapeedmonton.ca. I was checking out Friesen Brothers' website over the weekend. You can find it yourself at friesen.com. It's a great way to learn more about how family comes first at this family-owned business. For more than 65 years, they've been proudly supporting Alberta producers, featuring Alberta-grown products in all of their 16 Alberta locations. Now, don't forget, of course, that new store in South Edmonton is being celebrated for a whole bunch of things, including clearly labeled and easy to navigate vegan and vegetarian options. We're getting more and more feedback. I don't know why Hoyle's just raised her eyebrows here. Are you going to be surprised to hear? Are you going to be surprised to hear that I have tried a good number of the vegan and vegetarian options from Friesen Brothers in South Edmonton? Oh, heck yeah. Carrie's like on this mission to change my mind about things. So I had a vegetarian smoky, like a vegetarian hot dog from Friesen Brothers the other day. Pretty good.
The hot dog is
Pretty
a
good.
really hard thing
It
to
is, because
do.
the hot dog, the smoky needs fat in it.
Yeah, it
right?
does.
It needs fat. And so that's one thing where I'm kind of like, But it was actually pretty good. Put it this way, I ate the whole thing. So that, I ate the whole thing.
It wasn't a...
What more can I say? You can learn more at friesen.com. And a big shout out to the team at Westworld Computers, keeping our studio powered for more than 40 years. They've been doing that on the sales and the service side. Right now, you can book your service appointment or check out their inventory at westworld.ca. You know they'll ship anywhere across Canada. We just heard from a couple of friends in the interior design business. They said Daryl and the team hooked us up nice. They got a whole new fleet of MacBook Pros. You can check out the entire new lineup and learn more about some of the things that come along with supporting a small, family-owned business like Westworld. It's a different shopping experience than when you go to the big box store. You can find them online at westworld.ca. Let's get into this. It was a while ago that we asked our audience members. So every week, our friends at Y Station present alongside with us. They're our official research and strategy partners, our question of the week. And we had a couple of things happen, in particular, the discovery of these unmarked graves, or at least the numbers. These revelations have been dictating much of the conversation in Canada. It means that we've shuffled up some of our editorial lineup, and so we didn't get to the results of a question that we asked you mid-last month. It was a question that we asked you about Alberta's planned referendum question when the municipal election goes this fall, a referendum question around equalization. We asked what you think about the question in particular, and then we dug in a little further. 883 of you completed surveys via ryanjesperson.com, and, let's take a look at some of the key highlights. Overarchingly, you said no to whether or not you believe that Section 32-2 of the Constitution Act, Parliament and the Government of Canada's commitment to the principle of making equalization payments, should be removed from the Constitution. 88% of you, in other words, just about the same number of you that have unscientifically been chiming in on our Twitter this morning on our unofficial poll. This is a little more scientific, the Y Station stuff. We get more insight into background, demographics, geography. I mean, all the types of things of the people chiming in. But 88% overwhelmingly said this should not be removed. The equalization formula should not be removed from the Constitution. Now, let me say this. I guarantee that result is going to be different than what we're going to see in October when it comes to who's drawn to this question and answering this question. We'll get into that in a second, but here are some of the other key highlights as laid out by the team at Y Station. 61% of those of you that responded, 61% of Real Talkers said the best time to address this would have been when Alberta's Premier Jason Kenney was a federal cabinet minister. That was the last time that equalization was tweaked, essentially. This is Stephen Harper's equalization formula, if you want to put it that way. 61% said it would have been better done when now Premier Jason Kenney was a federal minister. Here's another key highlight from the team at Y Station. 45% of you, just under half of you that responded, think that this referendum is just cover to push a particular subset of voters to the municipal polls. 45%, which is actually lower than I was speculating, right? So the theory here, the speculation, the assertion would be that the type of voter that would be inclined to show up to strongly make a statement that equalization should be removed from the Constitution, in other words, that it's unfair to Alberta, that Alberta's getting screwed, the voter that would be most likely to show up to vote, yes, get rid of it, is also the type of voter that would likely support candidates that the Premier and that the provincial government would like to see win in the municipal elections. Now, of course, many would scoff and dismiss this and write it off as some sort of a tinfoil hat theory, but 45% of you believe that ultimately this is a bit of a ruse, that ultimately this is strategy, that that's what this is really all about. Sam, do we have one more? I think there's one key highlight. Let's take one more look at this. And a shout out to the team at Y Station that spends a portion of their weekends working on this. We really appreciate the partnership. 63% of Real Talkers, this question a little cheeky, 63% of the giggle from the back, 63% of Real Talkers think we should put the money earmarked for this referendum. It's pegged at, I've seen it pegged at about $11 million to support the referendum into like schools. 63% of you said we could probably better use the money on things like schools as opposed to asking this question. Now, Dr. Trevor Tombe out of the University of Calgary spoke about this back on June 16th. If you'd like to go back in our archives, you can, of course, find that on our YouTube channel. Thanks to everybody that subscribes. Thanks to everybody that hits like, by the way, on the shows that you're listening to or watching. And, of course, you can find it anywhere you get your podcasts as well. We asked you, well, hang on a second. If it's non-binding, why is this referendum question being asked? And here's what some of you had to say. Well, to stir up anger in Alberta. So they focus on nothing. Focus on a nothing referendum instead of other issues. Another says it's simply political theater, attempting to garner back voter support. Chris Henderson, who's the chief strategist at Y Station, I appreciate his notes on this, and I'm reading from our top line report. If you support us on Patreon every month, and thanks to everybody that does, more information on that right at the top of the page at ryanjesperson.com. There are perks, there are benefits, and one of them includes exclusive access to these top line reports every Sunday night or Monday morning when they're ready. And Chris Henderson says, we tried to find a strong conservative comment to balance out these selections, and we couldn't find one that we could include. He says, we do try to do that every week, though. Sorry. That from Chris Henderson, the chief strategist at Y Station. We asked for your thoughts on other perspectives, relating to this, and sometimes we just leave it open. We let the cursor blink, and it's just a big blank box. And many of you take the opportunity to kind of unload in a way. You know, one of you said there's just no good options here. I'm so sick of government. Another says the formula does need to be revamped so provinces like Quebec can't game the system and the redistributed equalization funds get to places where it's most needed. The audience member goes on to say, you'll never convince me places like Drayton Valley, Alberta couldn't have used more equalization help over the past few years than Montreal. Another said if the government of Alberta actually educated Albertans on the equalization process and formula and identified specific issues that could be adjusted, then the results of the referendum might mean something. Another says equalization is a great Canadian equalizer. Certainly it does seem Quebec is getting the best deal, and I'm open to revisiting the formula, but it's a great way to ensure that even if a province falters, Canada remains strong and its citizens are cared for equally across the provinces. Now, this week's question of the week takes a completely different tone. And again, you can find it at ryanjesperson.com under question of the week. Last week, we saw a record-breaking heat wave sweep across BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan in particular. There was actually horrific implications in some communities. People losing their lives. It's tragic. For those that did survive, I mean, stores sold out of fans and AC units, restaurants started handing out free water in some circumstances. We were hearing from people that were heading back to their workplace for the first time in more than a year just because there's air conditioning at work. In this week's Get Real, our question of the week, we want to hear from you about the steps that you took to prepare for or respond to this drastic heat wave. And then we couldn't help but have a little fun with it. We also ask you what's the best hot weather treat. And it is obviously an extremely shameless plug for our friends at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, who did not ask us to do this, but we thought we'd have a little fun. After, people might say, why so serious? There's a lot of stuff to talk about. Did we end up booking Professor Flanagan?
We did, the meteorologist, yes.
Okay, we're not talking about Tom Flanagan.
Nope.
We're not talking about one of the architects of Stephen Harper's rise to Prime Minister, Conservative Prime Minister of Canada. We're talking about Mike Flanagan. He's a wildfire specialist.
Yeah, and meteorologist. So he'll be speaking with us about the heat wave, about the weather, and about the implications, which are many, and that's happening on Wednesday morning.
Okay, good stuff. I don't think that I included that one because that was a recent booking. That happened just yesterday.
No, that was this morning.
This morning, Sarah Hoyles, well done. On Sunday, we put together and I'll release we call it our Real Talk Sunday message. It's free, obviously. Several thousand people subscribe. We invite you to join them if you haven't already. You go to our website, you scroll down to the bottom. That's where you can sign up for our email newsletter. By the way, check your junk mail folders if you're subscribed but you're not getting them or you think you're not. Some of our emails are going to people's junk folders, which is really tragic. I mean, really
this
unfortunate.
Ain't junk.
This is gold, Jerry, gold. But every week we give you a sense. We look back on the week that was. We link to some of our what we might call our highlight interviews, some of the must-see moments or the must-listen moments, and then we give you a peek at what's coming up in the week to come. It's a great way to stay in tune with what's happening on the show. It's our Real Talk Sunday message, and you can subscribe to it at the bottom of the page. So again, thanks to everybody that's going to chime in on our Real Talk question of the week. Also wanted to remind you we're constantly soliciting, do we call it feedback, what we receive for Trash Talk? It's more like vents. It's more like rants. It's more stuff you've got to get off your chest. Every Friday we bring you that. These are submitted to talk at ryanjesperson.com. It's presented by the team at Local Waste. They want to remind you the value of taking your business or keeping your business expenditures local. Local Waste has been in the game for more than a quarter century, still family owned, and they pride themselves on the relationships with their business partners, their clients, their customers. They start small and grow the relationship with you. I was talking to Mikkel, the CEO over there a while ago, and he made that statement to me that I felt like kind of just, it took me a second. I was like Bill and Ted. I was like, whoa, when he talked about it. He says, air's free, but it's expensive to dump. In other words, you got these small businesses that have been sold these big, huge bins, right? And they're paying big bucks to have these bins dumped, but they don't need big bins. Local Waste works with you to determine a plan that fits the size of your business, and they're proud to grow with their customers. You can find more at localwaste.ca. Also, big shout out to the team at St. Albert and Sherwood Dodge. We had our Grand Cherokee on the road this week, and as a matter of fact, both of them were a Jeep family, and that's a big reason because of the security and the reliability that comes with the brand. Since 1941, Jeep has been trusted by Canadians, and this year they're thrilled to roll out the Grand Wagoneer. This is the big luxury unit. This is the one that has the Escalade quivering in its wheel wells. The Jeep Grand Wagoneer is going to be a tough one to track down, but you won't find a better selection than you will at Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge. You can check out their inventories online. You can link to them under the sponsors tab at ryanjesperson.com. And a big shout out today to the team at Kuby Energy. Jake wanted me to remind you that right now there are incentives to the tune of thousands of dollars that could really cut down on the cost of you advancing your sustainability goals. If you have long dreamed or thought about putting solar panels on the roof of your garden shed, your home, your cottage, your cabin, your business, whatever, the team at Kuby Energy can point you in the right direction to make sure that you take advantage of all the incentives out there. You can tune in or find more about that at kubyenergy.ca. You know, each and every Monday, at least on our very first day of the broadcast week, the team at Kuby Energy also gets us started off on the right foot. It's a feature we adore called Positive Reflections. This is always better experienced on YouTube than the podcast, I have to say, and that's why we push these out as a separate file. You can watch Positive Reflections as a standalone by visiting the Real Talk Ryan Jesperson YouTube page. We just heard from Andrea, who says, you know, I've occasionally felt prompted to email a podcast or a show that I enjoy, but I've not followed through until now. This is a first for me. She says, we moved to Ottawa a couple of years ago to jumpstart my partner's career. We're originally both from Alberta. Shout out to Ponoka and Calgary. She says, we miss Alberta more than I can put into words. We approached the move with open hearts, every intention of falling in love with our nation's capital, but to be honest, neither of us consider it home. We want badly to move back, but we've been watching with dismay the devastating effects of the current government's bad public policy, the contempt for Albertans. Don't worry, it gets positive. She says, I often wonder about the province we left and whether it'll be the one that we'll one day return to if we return at all, but that's where Real Talk comes in. You, your audience, reminds me all the time of what I love most about Alberta. You highlight and put on display the very best of who we are as community. I'm grateful for the show. It gives me a little window into the place I love. It offers me hope and optimism and ingenuity that makes Alberta such a wonderful place to live and grow. She says, now on the positive side, one of the things I have fallen in love with is our puppy, Cassie, named after the Cascade Mountain. My partner got her as a surprise for Christmas this year, and after years of discussions on how badly we need a dog in our lives. Sam, let's roll this video. It's hilarious. Andrea says she's almost 8 months old, and you can see we're trying to teach her how to swim, but despite being mostly a lab, she's not great at swimming. She says you can see in this video that she only uses her front paws. She kind of looks like my boxer Moses trying to swim. So we've been trying to find different ways of cooling her off in the summer heat, and we took her and let her loose in Lake Ontario, and we're thrilled to announce that not only did she discover she can use her back paws for swimming, she learned how much she loves to jump around in the waves. She says those flapping ears make me smile, and I hope that it does the same thing for the audience. Andrea says, thanks for the tough conversations. It's the only way we can all be better while bringing some light to each and every day. An amazing email from Andrea. Thanks so much. This was submitted to us by Greg, who tagged us on Twitter, and I don't have anything to say about this. I don't know why Greg passed it along. Sam, let's just roll it. I don't even know how the heck people got this camera shot, but this might be the most Canadian thing you're going to see this week. Greg sent us this video posted on Reddit of a beaver gnawing through a tree. How many chances do you get to get this up close to a beaver doing its thing?
Crunch, crunch.
Right? It sounds like kind of hammering down on Ripple chips.
It's making me hungry.
Look at that little
hungry
fella
for tree
go.
bark?
Doing what it's got to do. I felt like it was kind of a nice, fun inclusion on Positive Reflections because there's the whole busy beaver thing and everyone's getting going this week and kids are going into summer camps and we've all got work in front of us and alas, take a page out of the notebook of the mighty beaver, the official rodent of Canada, isn't it? Thanks to Greg for passing that along. Before we sign off, I wanted to let you know that next week on Positive Reflections, we're going to be launching a contest. It's a big one, and you're not going to want to miss it. If you consider who sponsors the segment and what they do, there's reason to get excited.
I'll leave
it there for now. That's coming up next Monday here on the show. Thanks for tuning in, friends. Make it a great week. One love. We'll see you tomorrow.